Welcome to Daily Armour. Today I'm in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I thought that I was going to be dealing with verses 1 through 6, but I think I'm not even going to make it out of verse number 1 today. Really want to think about some things of the past that can help me in things of today, the things of the blessings that the Lord has provided and what He's done in the past. We're wanting to reach into those memory books, why we need to share what God has done for us, because others need to hear that. They need to hear that there's hope. They need to hear that God is faithful and that God will provide, and they need to hear about it. And we're going to see here in verse number 1 how that for things that happened years and years and years previous, the people were getting help today for things that had happened to their ancestors, things that had been shared with generation after generation after generation. And as it convicts me that I need to share more with my children about what the Lord has done, so that they can use that to help them in their walk, and then they can therefore teach their children as well. I needed to be telling my grandchildren. I need to be sharing more and more about miracles and things that how God has provided and what He has done. Our testimonies are very powerful, especially that specific testimony that you have and that I have, that's specific to me, that's specific to you, personal, individual, of the day that He came and He saved my wretched soul, the day that He saved your wretched soul. Those are powerful testimonies that we need to share with others. Let's look at verse number 1, and Lord willing, in the next few days that I'm wanting to really get into a little bit more of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, but it'll be up to the Lord. I've already got other things that I want to study, and we'll just see how far the Lord lets us get out of 1 Corinthians 10. Looking at verse number 1, it says, "Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant." He's like, I don't want you to be unaware. He says, I want you to know some things. I want you to be aware of some things. He doesn't want us to be ignorant. That ignorant is just not having the knowledge of something, not being aware of something. There's so many things in my life I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't have any idea. And the scripture is all about making us aware, so that we can't say, well, I didn't know. Well, if we're in His Word, we're going to find out some things. I mean, sometimes we're going to find out some things that are hard to look at, like passing through that mirror and be like, oh my goodness, I didn't notice I had a big smudge on my face, or I didn't, I just noticed that wrinkle today. I was unaware of it yesterday. I wished I was still unaware of it. But there's always some wonderful things as well that the Lord can make us aware of. Because He's wanting to help us and give us strength and encouragement and joy and hope, and that hope is in Jesus. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant, so being made aware of some things, how that our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. And there's so much more being said in these verses, and I can't seem to even get out of just what's being said here in verse number 1, reminding us of how God has provided. This is going back to the book of Exodus. We're in New Testament, First Corinthians chapter 10. We're talking. Paul is talking to the Corinthian church. He is reminding them of all those things that has happened in the Jewish history, of how God has provided and moved and did amazing miracles. And He's saying, I need you to be aware, because that same God that did those things way many years ago is still moving like that today. And as Paul was writing this to the Corinthians, and as I'm sharing this with you, I know God has so many more amazing things to do with us today. And we are to expect it, but we're also to respect it. And let's look back in a little bit of history, going back to the days of Exodus, when the children of Israel were in bondage. And as we were sinners, we were in bondage. We were slaves. We were not allowed to leave Egypt. We were not allowed to, have freedom or, We were always in bondage. And bondage to self, bondage to Satan, bondage to circumstances, bondage to everything. But God came and he set his people free. And I have been set free. I was set free on a Monday night in the year 2000. And I am so thankful. It's been over 24 years and I'm so thankful. And what's happened for me and what's happened for you, we still need to share that. We need to tell others. And so as we're looking back in this Exodus, I want to go to Exodus chapter 13, and I also want to be looking at Exodus chapter 14. Exodus 13, looking at verse 21. Exodus 14 will be verse 21. So let's go back and look and see what the Lord did. It says, verse number 21 in chapter 13 of the book of Exodus says, "And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night." So we're looking here that God was leading. He was protecting. We see this cloud. This cloud was also was there for guidance, but it was also there for protection. It would often come between them and the enemy couldn't see them for the cloud. God would put a block. God would block his people in protection, and he would put himself right in that way. Jesus came to be that cloud, to be that intercessor, to be that block, to be that what the enemy can't get through. The enemy cannot get through. The enemy can't even see us. They can't even get to us because Jesus is that cloud. He's that pillar. And he's using that, the God who was using that cloud himself as leading the people, but also for that protection. And I love that. Went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way. He is leading us. He is leading me somewhere. He's leading you somewhere. I don't have all the details. I'm not the leader. I don't need to know all the details. As you look to others that are in leadership roles, as I look to others that are in leadership roles, my husband being the leader of our home, my husband also being my pastor. So I look to him as he's leading our church. I look to him as leading our home. And he's ultimately making decisions. And I am helping. I am praying. And he will bounce stuff off of me, and I will share with him my perspective on things. And so we definitely work as a team, but at the same time, he is leading. God is leading him so that he can lead me. God is leading him so that he can lead our church. God is leading him so that he can be still that head of our family, and leading even our adult children, still showing that leadership of the Lord. And so as we're looking to those earthly leaders, and we need to be praying for them that they are being led of the Lord. And God is leading, and he is leading me to use my testimony to share it with others. Just like that we're talking about here, that Paul is sharing the testimony of what has been handed down from generation to generation to generation and generation. It's been wrote down, it's been shared, it's been read. They can go back. It says all of our fathers. So everybody there, they all experienced this together. They all were aware of the Lord together, and they're aware that the Lord was the one leading. Moses may have been who was at the beginning, but Moses was being led of the Lord, and they knew that. As we look to those leaders in our life, we know that ultimately we are relying on God himself, not them. Men will let us down, men will fall. Moses wasn't always perfect. But God is always perfect. He is always faithful. And that cloud was there for leadership, and for protection. And then that pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. In other words, no matter what comes and goes in our life, we know God is that constant, that consistent, that unchangeable, unchanging Lord. He is faithful even when I mess up, even when I'm not faithful. God is faithful, and that is my pillar. That is my rock. That is my source of strength. That is what that's what I'm relying on. I'm relying on his faithfulness, not mine. I'm relying on his leadership, not mine. I'm relying on him. And I just love that. And as we are reminded of that here in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and Paul is sharing that with the people in the Corinthian church, he wants them to be grounded and rooted. And we are in the Lord. We're grounded and rooted in the Lord. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant. He doesn't want us to be unaware. We need to know some things of the past so that we can help with those things of the present. How that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. Now let's go talk about that sea. This was how the Lord provided this miraculous fleeing of getting away from the enemy, this miraculous thing that he did. Look in chapter 14 of the book of Exodus. Look again at verse number 21. And it says in verse number 21, it says, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea. See, Moses didn't do it. He's just that representative. God did it. Then the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. He took this, they were surrounded by the enemy. The enemy was behind them. There was mountain on each. They were surrounded. They had the sea in front of them, the mountains on each side, and the enemy right on their tails, right there behind them. And God uses Moses, and God causes the waters to back up, divide up. And he's drying up all that. I mean, not only did he divide the waters, the ground that they crossed on was dry. If they had tried to cross on that muddy ground, they wouldn't have made it. They would have gotten stuck in the mud. But God went so far as to push the sea back on both sides and to dry the ground up. This took a miracle. This was not able, man couldn't do this. There was nothing that we could do about this. There's going to be situations and you cannot do anything about it. Your hands are tied. I've been there. My hands have been completely tied. I have tried and tried and tried. I have, done this and that and made changes and done all that I can do. I have exhausted all of my resources, all of my knowledge, all of my finances to try to fix my problems, my issues. And I get to that point where I'm at the end of my rope and I'm dangling by a string. That's the way I was the night I got saved. I had tried everything. I'd been reading my Bible. I'd been faithful to church. I'd volunteered for everything. I was giving my tithes. I was giving my time. I was doing all those things that I thought I was supposed to do as a Christian, but I didn't have the Lord. I wasn't saved. And all those things that I was doing was not earning my way to heaven. I needed the Savior. I can't get there. I can't earn my way. You can't earn your way. You can't do enough good to get to heaven. There's none of us that are good enough for that. Jesus was the only one that was perfect, and he was perfect. Why? Because he's God. And it took God himself. This crossing of the Red Sea took God himself to make it. He parted those things and made a way for the people to cross. He parted some things and Jesus made the way for us to go from here to heaven. The people were blocked. They were not able, they were surrounded. There was no way they could get through. And there was no way that I was going to heaven my way. I couldn't get there. I was surrounded by the enemy. I was blocked on every side. Mountains, the sea, the enemy. I was blocked on every side. And then Jesus came and he parted everything. The garment was parted. The curtain was, it rent. That was a picture of him making the way. He paid the price that needed to be paid. and he made the way, and it was available, and I was able to cross. I was able to be saved. You're able to be saved. You are, if you are saved, you were able to be saved because Jesus made the way. He is the way. He parted those things. He did that miraculous that I can't get to heaven on my own. You can't get to heaven. The people could not get across on their own. God had to part some things. He had to do some things that just it took a miracle. It took himself. It took himself. Jesus is God. God himself had to make a way. God himself is the way. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And he parted the waters. Back in verse number 21, he caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of the fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, and they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. The enemy even recognized that this is the Lord. The enemy even recognized that. There was a testimony shared last night by one of the missionaries. We're having our missions conference this week, and this one was from Haiti, and he had been taken, he had been kidnapped, and even that he was eventually let go, because there was something about him, and he's got such a sweet spirit. There was something about him that the enemy couldn't seem to do with them what they wanted. That even the enemy recognized that he was a man of God, and he says, they told him, they set him free. They set him free. Said, you've got to leave. You've got to go home. You've got to go back. And they set him free. I don't know how many days that he was there kidnapped. I don't know. I don't remember if he even shared exactly how many days he had been there. And he prayed for others that had been there longer than him. When he was kidnapped, there was others there that had been kidnapped as well, had been taken by these gangs. And he shared with us how the Lord had, by a miracle, had taken care of it, and had even the enemy recognizing God's got his hand on this man, and you've got to get out of here. You've got to leave. You've got to go back home. And so he was freed by the Lord, because he was the Lord's man, because even the enemy recognized his God, which is the one true Jehovah God. And here the Egyptians, they recognized that they weren't fighting the people. The people, they were like, oh, we're more than them. We got better equipment. They were like, we can take them. They're no problem. You know, that wolf or that bear or that lion that's looking at us as a sheep, and they're like, oh, I can take them. But the shepherd, on the other hand, that's another issue. That's another scenario. This scenario here, the Egyptians were made aware that their God is fighting for them, and we're no match for him. Whenever that sheep that is out there and that enemy is lurking, we're no match for the lion or the bear or the wolf. We're no match for that. But our shepherd, our great shepherd, can take care of the enemy, and he does that here in Exodus chapter 14. He does that. They passed through the sea, and even though the enemy was still in pursuit, God was fighting for them, and they start panicking, and they start trying to flee, and they're getting stuck, and their journey is hard, and God is intervening. It actually ends up that he turns the waters back loose, and they are destroyed by the very sea that freed the people. The very God made a way, but he also turned that back on the enemy and was able to defeat the enemy. And that's what he does in my life all the time. He is able to defeat the enemy. I can't. I'm just a little old sheep. I don't have any defense mechanism. I don't have any, way for me to know where to go or what to do. I need God, and He is leading me, and He is guiding me, and He's directing me, and He's protecting me, and He's helping me, and He provided the way of salvation. He provided a way for me to go to heaven and be with Him. And I'm so thankful, and I'm so blessed, and I know you are, and we need to share that with others. We need to share our testimonies about the day that we got saved. We need to share those things in our life that God does along the way and how that He is providing. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.